It's the worst of the CBC for Labor Day, September 2nd, 2019. And it is great to be back watching the CBC so you don't have to. Well, it's not great to watch the CBC, but it's great that you don't have to. So thank me. All right. What was on the news today? Nothing. There was no news on the news today. Was there news? Of course there was news. News worth being reported? Of course, that's what the news is for. But did the news report the news? No, then it wouldn't be the news. I think. Well, if that makes sense, then you've been watching too much CBC. So, what was on the top docket today? There's a fire in California on a boat. I guess that's newsworthy. Is it the lead story in Canada? No, I think there's actually stories for Canadians that are worth more than that. Second was hurricane. A hurricane's going to hit the Hurricane Alley in hurricane season. Oh, we must go through this little dance every year. At least they didn't blame Trump for the hurricane. That was a small blessing. Can we get rid of the disaster reporting fixation? My favorite, though, I do want to keep, though, every time in January or February when it starts to snow really hard somewhere and CNN gets, like, someone in the streets, it's snowing in January, it's Snowmageddon. Then they put Chris Cuomo out in the snow. So you'll be like, I saw a snowflake. Why are you walking? Why are you outside? It's snowing. It's good. I think it's actually good that CNN does this because Chris Cuomo could use some air and it's nice that he can just splash around and play in the snow. He gets cooped up when you put him in studio all the time. So if you guys see Chris Cuomo around, scratch behind his ears, tell him he's a good reporter boy. They like that. It's a nice thing to do. But other than that, not really worth 10 minutes of news, especially when there's only half an hour of news today. Then there was the Hong Kong protests. And what are we going to do? Don't say the magic word. Communism. Yes, we must cover the Hong Kong protests. How can we cover the Hong Kong protests every day and still not mention that they're protesting the communist Chinese government? What are they protesting? The Chinese government. What type of government? Communist. What do they want? Reforms. What type? Democratic, pro-capitalist reforms. Oh. Ugh. So what ended up getting covered, and we'll have to use the worst story of the day, is there's an incident of the dreaded Islamophobia. Dun, dun, dun. So the leader of the Canadian Citizens Alliance for Citizens, they're allying nationally, I can't remember the name. He confronted Gurtan Singh, the NDP's leader's brother. He's an MPP in Ontario. And he confronted him, and the way the news said it is, he confronted Gurtan Singh saying something about Sharia. And you can hear the video they even show, and he quite clearly says, do you support Sharia law? Right? It's not something about, he asked Gurtan Singh if he supported Sharia law. Now, am I in favor of what this guy did? No. Not that we shouldn't question politicians, but if you're going to question him, don't just take a phone and just start yelling, do you support Sharia? Be tactful, right? I watched the full clip in context, and he did open with, are you aware that the Muslim Brotherhood started to use the term Islamophobia in the 1990s to push forward a radical agenda? And Gurtan goes, that's racist. You're racist. And then he goes, do you support Sharia? Do you support Sharia? There are better ways to do this, right? If you want to start that way, what you can do is you could say, are you aware that the Muslim Brotherhood in their own documents has said they're going to be using the term Islamophobia to push forth a radical agenda? Are you afraid this will undermine the legitimate aspects to Muslim human rights? All right, then if they go, you're racist, they'll never answer that question. Never. They'll call you racist. But this way, when they call you racist, they look like a fool. Alternatively, you could use the Emmanuel Macron quote, right? The president of France said, political Islam is a force that's trying to secede from our nation, sowing division. You could use that quote against him, and if he calls you racist, well, then you have a case. He calls France racist, right? Then you have something. But just sort of taking a cell phone and yelling at politicians is not always the most productive way. Now, the CBC did a horrendous job, right? They're saying something. He just asked him to support Sharia. He's something called political Islam. Again, if Emmanuel Macron has used the phrase political Islam, it's not just something called political Islam anymore. And then we have the whole thing of he did this even though he's Sikh, not Muslim. It's like, guys, he was talking at Muslim Fest. That's why he did this. Now, again, this is not the best way to go about it. This makes you just seem like that people who don't like Sharia law are just yelling into the wind about Muslims. There is a better way to question politicians on the concept of radical Islam and political Islam. Think of a real question, right? Don't just, think of a real question, ask it to them, let them respond. And then when they say, you're racist, well, then you have them. But this way it just turns into a shouting match and no one wins. And the media gets to push the narrative that people are just yelling at Muslims incoherently. And that's Islamophobia, and it's the biggest problem. Now, what are we going to admit here? What is the omitted story of the day? I think it has to be the fact that there's another political party in Canada. There's a different political party, not the Citizens United or whatever. It's called the Liberal Party. Now, they're actually quite big. They actually hold a majority in the government, and the Prime Minister is currently part of the Liberal Party. Now, the Liberal Party just had to disqualify a candidate for systematic anti-Semitism. Now, Hassan Gillette, who is a MP, who is an imam from Quebec, and his mosque on their website has a myriad of anti-Semitic statements, referring to many Muslim imams who have said, quoted the hadith and spoken, there's the hadith that says, oh, Allah prays, the end of times will not come until Muslims fight the Jews everywhere, and Jews will hide behind the rocks and trees, and the trees will even say, hey, there's a Jew, come kill me, behind me, come kill it, except for the Gurkha tree, and that tree will hide the Jews. There are like 3 different parts where they allude to that on the website. They also supported a pro-Hamas person who had, again, promoted violence against Jews, murder, ethnic cleansing. And in the Hamas charter, they say, oh, Allah, Jews, trees, the whole shebang, and a lot more. They also allege that Jews use the blood of children to bake their bread. Is that anti-Semitism? We don't know, right? The way the CBC originally wrote the article is conservatives allege liberal candidate make anti-Semitic statements. Could you maybe go to the website, check and say, oh, Jews use the blood of children to make their bread? Is that anti-Semitism? We don't know. There's no way to tell. Is the medieval blood libel, is that anti-Semitic? Beats me. Now the CBC did report that the whole story will come out later. The MP says he's not anti-Semitic and it will come out later. Can the CBC send a reporter to say, you know what? Hamas says this, murder the Jews. Do you agree? Yes or no? Then you have your answer there. But that's something called reporting, and that is not in the vocabulary of the CBC editors. So that has been the worst of today's CBC. I'm going to give this on the scale of Romy Bartman like an NA, because there really was no news. So this gets a full NA, because if they did the news, who knows? Yeah, this is a paradox. Make your own rating. Want your own, give it your own rating. Meh.